Hey everyone, Craig here, and today we're going to be talking about the virtualization component of our lab, oVirt. So what is it? So oVirt is a hypervisor. It's similar to ESX in terms of how it works. So you've got a ISO, you load it onto your node, and it becomes a thing that can run some virtual machines. There's a second component to it too, the hosted engine. And what we're going to be doing today is setting up the hosted engine to be running on top of one of our oVirt nodes. oVirt itself is a great project. It's actually the upstream community version to Red Hat's enterprise virtualization product. And that means that it gets bug fixes, it gets security fixes, all that kind of stuff sent upstream, which is really cool. It's based on top of KVM, so it's nice and reliable, and it's got a ton of features in there. There's templating, there's quoting, there's Gluster if you want to do hyper-converged storage and all that kind of jazz. But what I'm kind of really interested in is live migration. That's kind of a deal breaker for me. I want to see things like able to configure my networks. I want to be able to configure permissions for different users, and I want to. I'm quite interested as well because there's a function here called the user portal, the VM portal, and basically it means that a user without any kind of admin permission gets a screen like this, and they can create virtual machines and they can manage their own machines. So that's quite interesting. I kind of like the idea of that because again, it's lining up to my idea of being able to give somebody a login to this system and away they go. So let's look at downloading this thing. So in order to get hold of it, if we hit downloads, we'll get to this page here. Now, for the hypervisor component, there's a couple of ways that you can install it. First of all, you've got a dedicated minimal hypervisor ISO. All it does is runs virtual machines. So it's really bare bones. It does what it says on the tin. The second option that you've got is if you want to run something that's a bit more full fat, or you've got some custom drivers that you need to load in, or I don't know, maybe you're a bit crazy and you want to run Ceph hyper-converged with your hypervisors. I don't know. You can do it by running just a standard CentOS machine or a standard RHEL machine, and then installing the hypervisor components because it's just KVM with a couple of agents on top. In our case, we're going to opt for the dedicated hypervisor nodes. The reason for that is purely that I don't want to have to think about any of the extra kind of tuning overheads or any kind of extra management. All the patch management is handled in the oVirt node for you. And I also don't want to have to think about too much more about any kind of additional attack surfaces or anything like that either. So for me, having just a dedicated hypervisor node works quite nicely. It's also following the VMware pattern of kind of having something that does one thing and it does it very well. So let's do that. So in order to get hold of this thing, if we click this link here, this oVirt node 4.3 stable release, and then we're going to select 4.3.6, which is currently the latest version of the installer, and EL7. EL7 just means Enterprise Linux. It just means that it's based on CentOS. And then if we hit this, we'll be able to download the ISO. Now I've cheated a little bit. I've already got the ISO, so I'm going to go ahead and just cancel that. So before we go on to the install, I just want to shout out a couple of people here as well. So I've had a number of issues with ILO 4 and getting into the console remotely from inside Linux. And my biggest issue was to do with the support that Java has for ILO and the fact that ICE-T Web and ILO 4 just do not get along. There's a bug somewhere. I don't know where it is. Some of the kind of bug reports seem to suggest that it might be HP that need to fix something. I don't know. I don't really care as long as something works. I don't care who fixes it, kind of thing. But what I've come across is a blog, a forum post here from Daniel, And Daniel has pointed us. So this is a post talking about this problem. The console not ILO remote console not working on a Linux machine. And he's pointed us to this blog post, Weta, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, weta.com. And if we go over to this blog post, there's a really simple solution for it. You literally grab hold of the JRE tar file, extract it, move it to opt, and then you can just use it. And it just works. So I've run this already. If I go up here and do this, and what we'll see is, hopefully, there we go, a security warning saying cert's not right, and then we get the console. It's great and it works. So you can see here, this is a node that I've been preparing for the next part of our video here, just while I've been doing a couple of other bits and waiting for stuff. But this is great. I can mount my remote media and all sorts. It's great. So thank you all for sharing that. It's always really nice to find a solution to a problem and not just a bunch of people complaining that there's a problem. Because the next person that comes along and has the same problem, they're going to do exactly the same thing. They'll post a message in the forum and say, oh, this doesn't work. But they might find a fix and then just never post it. So it's really nice to find this kind of stuff. Anyway, on with oVirt. We're going to go ahead and do the install now. So I'll catch you in a second. Okay, so anybody who's gone ahead and installed CentOS before, this should be familiar to you. It's just a kind of standard CentOS installer. So what we'll do is we'll follow it through and yeah, see where we get to. So I'm going to select English as the language, English UK, because that's where I'm from. And then next thing I'm going to do is going to go ahead and when it resolves stuff, we're going to set the installation destination. There we go. So I want this to install to this disk here. So there's a 1 terabyte 3.5 inch disk. So that's what we're going to use as our OS disk. So we'll just go ahead and select that. Actually, I was hoping it would have. There we go. Whoops, I selected manual partitioning. Didn't mean to do that. Done. Let's go back in, select, and then automatic. And I will make additional free space available. It basically just allows you to go in and wipe what's there. There we go. So I'm going to say delete all. So this host was an ESX host, so we'll just clear that all away. Don't want any of that. Okay, so keyboard, English UK, done. That was easy. Time, we're going to go with UTC. Okay, so UTC is set, done. Network and host name. Okay, so this is where we need to do a little bit of configuration. So you can see here we've got our two Chelseo 420CR 10 gig adapters. But for the initial configuration, I'm actually going to configure this management interface here. Because we'll do the Chelseo 10 gig stuff from inside of oVirt. Do we want to do it that way? Yeah, we'll configure this and we'll. Okay, so what are we going to configure? I want to configure an IP address. I'm going to set this to be manual. And IP wise, we're going to use 10.50. What network is this on? 101. I don't know. So I've got a naming convention for my hosts. So let me just double check what this IP should be. All right. So the IP for this server is going to be. There we go. 10.11. And the net mask for this is going to be a /23, and the gateway is going to be 10.1. It's just the first IP in the range. Now the DNS server is going to be that, and the search domain is going to be core.uk.eti.io. So we'll save that. We'll enable that interface, and that gives us our configuration. Now the host name, I'm going to set this to be server01.core.uk.eti.io. There we go. Result. Okay, and that's our network configured. As far as we need it to be. That's actually, do we want to configure the storage right now as well? No, we'll leave that as it is for now. No, we're going to need to configure the storage. We've only presented iSCSI on the one interface, haven't we? Okay, so if we go ahead and what we're going to do here. So our storage, if you remember, is presented on another VLAN. So how can we configure another VLAN here? General Ethernet. Where do we configure that? I'm not sure we actually can. Not here. I probably need to go here and do this and do that. And the parent interface is going to be ENS1F4, which is this one here. No, it's not. 1F4, 1D, this one. Okay, now our VLAN is going to be 150. And this can be VLAN 150 for the interface name. This needs to be 9000, because if you remember, we're using jumbo frames. And the IP address we're going to configure is 192.168.250.11. That's going to be on a /24, and there's no gateway because so it's not routable. Okay, perfect. So this interface, I don't actually want it to be using. Well, that's there. That's annoying. I don't want it to be using DHCP at all. I want this to be link local only, I think. Manual. Yeah, let's do link local only. Perfect. So that should give us our networking. So the reason why I've done that is when we come to set up the management engine, we're going to need to connect that off to the iSCSI storage. So we're going to already need to have that kind of in place. We could have done it using Cockpit after the install, and we will go and revisit it just to validate that it's correct, but that should get us to where we want to go. So I don't really want to configure anything else in here. I'm not too fussed about a security profile at this point, so we'll just go ahead and begin the installation. There we go. Configure a root password. And now what it's doing is just going ahead and installing to disk. So we'll come back when it's finished. Okay, so now we've got an oVirt node. So we can go ahead here and just quickly log into the console. And there we go. So because it's an oVirt node, there's actually a nice web GUI. So it's not like a normal CentOS box where you've just got a bunch of stuff installed. I mean, it is in that respect because packages are packages. But what we're going to do is we're going to use a tool called Cockpit now to manage this thing. So if you remember, we set a IP address of that. So with fingers crossed, we should see. There's our 2.11. Oh, that's annoying. So it looks like it hasn't carried through our network configuration. Okay, let's configure that. So we're going to use the network manager UI tool here to configure this. So what I was expecting was this. Okay, I see what I've done here. So I didn't select automatically connect, which meant that the interface hasn't come up, but that's fine. We can just go ahead and enable that. and we'll drop out of the network manager tool, and if we go to IP address, we should see, yeah, there it is. Now we've got this this interface. So if we go ahead and go back here, we might have to restart things. Oh no, there we go. Sure enough, we've got Cockpit. Now, Cockpit is really handy. It's a great way of being able to log into your machine. It'll take your local host credentials or whatever you're using with PAM to log in. And it gives you a nice overview of your server. It gives you some nice statusy bits. It gives you an overview of the config. So if you want to see what your network's doing, you've got some logs, you've got some slightly more detail around each particular interface. You can go in, you can configure them, and you can do some quite nice things. You can go and you can see how much of your CPU is in use, how much of your memory, how much of your disk, and how much of your network, so on and so forth. You can even do things like joining it to an IPA realm if you've got that. This is a realm D's AD, but you can enroll it into IPA2. There's ways here as well where you can manage your network, your services. So if you wanted to go to SSH, let's find SSH. Here we go, SSHD, and we wanted to restart it. It's easy enough to do that. You just click on the service and hit restart. So it's quite a nice way of interacting with your machine. You've got your SA Linux policies here as well. You've got a terminal to save you having to SSH in. You can actually do your stuff here, and you've got access to logs as well, so it's quite good for troubleshooting and debugging. But the reason why we're using this is we're going to be using it to set up the hosted engine. So the second component of oVirt, first being the hypervisor, the second bit is actually, well, the management interface, because right now we don't have a management interface. We've got something here which shows us bits about this particular machine, but not really anything else. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we've gone to virtualization and hosted engine, and we're going to start this hosted engine deploy process. Now it gives us quite a nice wizard. I must admit, last time I ran this wizard, I did have an issue and I needed to override the UI, but it was only a UI bit of weirdness. So we'll see if it's improved. I expect it will have done. Okay, so while we're waiting for this as well, we're going to need to go ahead and create a data store for the hosted engine to reside on. So if we go over to our FreeNAS machine, and I'll just make sure I'm logged in, because it's probably, oh no, I'm still logged in. And what we're going to do is, probably on my slow storage actually, I'm going to create a really small, probably 150 gig volume. So if I go to pools, we've got our in fact no, I am going to put it into our virtual machine pool over here. So if we create a new Z vault, I'm going to call this one hosted engine 01 because I like numbers. We're going to create it 150 gigs. We can leave all of the other settings, and this one I'm going to create it sparse, so I want to thin provision this. Okay, so that's created the volume in the pool. So in gold pool here we've got hosted engine. Now we need to share it, so if we go back across to our iSCSI block storage, and we need to create a extent. So same as before, ext hosted engine 01. It's going to be device type, and the device we're going to be sharing is this hosted engine zvol. We'll leave the block size and we'll leave the other bits and pieces, and just hit save on that. And then we're going to associate that, and we're going to put it into our target. So the target is going to be the oVirt data store. The LUN ID, we're going to go with 3 because we've already used 1 and 2. And it's this ext hosted engine. Save. And there we are. Okay, so when we get to the point in the installation here for the hosted deployment, it's going to ask us to where it can put the hosted engine storage. It creates it initially on the local machine and then transfers it across. So that'll give us that option or that ability. Okay, so now it wants to create our engine, so we're going to go and create some DNS records. Okay, so I've just gone ahead and I've created a DNS entry in IDM for my domain here. So I've got oVirt.core.uk.eti.io. There we go. And so the network configuration is going to be static. So we're going to set this to 10.50.10.200. And this is a /23. My DNS is going to be .100.37 like so. The bridge interface we're going to set to EN0. And I'm going to set a root password. I'm going to allow root SSH access here as well. Number of virtual CPUs, I'm going to ramp this up a bit. I'm also going to ramp the memory up to 32 gig, which would be 32, something like, we'll set it to that and see where we go from there. I know it's not quite 32 gig. In terms of advanced, I'm not going to set a SSH key yet. The gateway, I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that. I'm not going to set an OpenSCAP profile at the moment, and we'll do a DNS test. Okay, so admin portal passwords, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get a password set. Notification wise, so I don't have a mail server internally at this point, so I'm going to leave that as it is. Hit next. We're going to go ahead and prepare the VM. Now what this does is it's running a bunch of Ansible playbooks for us against the local node. So this particular server 01 host that we've just created, and it creates the VM for the engine and then goes and configures it. So it's actually quite a nice way of doing the install. I quite like this. So we'll let this go and we'll come back when it's finished. Okay, fantastic. So the installation has finally got there. That took quite a while. I think it must have taken about a half hour or something like that for it to go through. I had to stop the computer going to sleep a couple of times and ILO timed out and stuff like that. But we're there. We've got a created hosted engine now. So let's go on to the next step. So as we talked about earlier, we're going to need to put the hosted engine storage somewhere. So we've already prepared something for this. So if we stick in, hopefully that is our portal, and this is where I can't remember what I set the password to. So hopefully what this is going to do now is it's going to go off to FreeNAS and it's going to take a look, and hopefully it should get a list, this list here. And this list is our LUNs, so we should then be able to select that and tell it that's what to use. I'm kind of doubting a little bit that our network connectivity is going to work correctly. Yeah, I kind of had a feeling that might have been the case. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm just going to open up another window. And if I go over here, and we'll just double check the networking configuration because it's probably something silly that I've failed to configure correctly. Yeah, so here you can see already the VLAN isn't up. Why is that inactive? Oh, I've made exactly the same mistake. Okay, so let's set the... Okay, so I just obviously didn't configure this correctly. So let's set this to manual. Let's make sure that we're set to that and apply. VLAN parent setting diff. All right, let's have a look. And so our parent is this one. Apply. Okay, let's delete that. Let's start again. So which of our... No carrier, That's fine. So that's what we expected for this interface. So if we look for this one, excellent 10 gig, we'll bring this up. We'll set the MTU to 9000. It should change automatically anyway. IPv4, we're going to set that just to disabled. We don't want DNS. We don't want any routes. We'll just apply that. IPv6, I'm going to actually disable this as well. We'll just ignore it and do the same thing. Apply. And now if we create our VLAN, so our parent is this, the VLAN is 150, and we'll just create that. Oh, that's looking better already, isn't it? And then we're going to do the same again for VLAN 151. And I'll make sure I put it on the correct interface. There we go. Okay, so IP wise, this is our, we don't want any of this to be automatic. We want to manually specify an address, and the address for this machine is 250.11. This is server 1, so we're going to stick it in 11. The net mask is going to be a 24, no gateway. So we're going to set the MTU here to 9000 as well. Make sure we got jumbo frames, and we're going to disable IPv6 because again I don't want it on this VLAN. We're not doing anything with IPv6. Okay, so let's do the same again, and we'll configure the interface over here. So this is 251.11. You might be seeing a pattern here. It's a /24, and we don't want any of this automatic stuff happening. So apply that, and we'll go ahead and disable IPv6. It's not fully disabling it, it's just not getting any of the configuration. We want the MTU to be set to 9000. There we go. Done. What you may want to do with this is set up these two interfaces to be bonded. Obviously I've only got one NIC. I could have sworn I had two physical connections, two cables going into this one. I know there was one of these boxes that only had one cable going in, so it's probably just typical that I found the one with only a single connection. Anyway, so if we go back over to here and try and retrieve that target list again, because we've now got an interface that's in this network, it should work. At least I'm expecting it to be able to detect those targets. Okay, still not detecting it. Why is that? We might need to set a discovery. To be honest, I've probably set the wrong credentials. So let me go and just double check what I set. So portals, edit, no, not that one, authorized access, that's the one. So the user is oVirt. We're only doing chat, we're not doing mutual chat. There we go. So what I did there to make that work was I put the credentials, in this advanced section, I've put the credentials here. So I'm also going to set this to 100 gig for the data store. We'll select this target, and what it's going to do now is give us a list of the LUNs. So we can see this is the FreeNAS host, and it's the oVirt data stores target that it's pulling information for. So the way that we've configured FreeNAS, because over, where did we set it? Over here somewhere we set, it might be in the initiators. Which setting was it? Anyway, there's a setting that we've chosen. Here it is. This auth method here, because we've set authentication for the target, when you come to do any kind of discovery, so if you rely on this kind of discovery service, then you're going to have to present the credentials too, but that's okay. We knew this. Now this is exactly the bug that I ran into last time. So can you see here, we've got 3 LUNs, we've got a orange triangle there saying there's no space, doesn't have sufficient capacity. We can see clearly that all of these are bigger than 100 gigabytes. Even if I set this to 58 again, it's still not enough. So if I set that back to 100, what I actually ended up doing for this was dropping into developer tools, which is I'm used to doing this on Mac. There we go, Control-Shift-I. And if you select the element, so this isn't really a very good thing to need to do, but if you select the element, there's basically, hang on, oh, where is it? How do I move to the, how do I scroll left and right? So the radio, can you see here that, there we go, the radio button is disabled. So I'm just going to delete the word disabled from this radio button because that's the one I want to select. And I'm going to hit enter to change the code. And then if I select that and then hit next, it'll allow us to proceed. That's really not good. I really should raise a bug for that. So if I go ahead and finish deployment, and what's going to happen now is the hosted engine VM that's already been created, that's going to now be copied across. It'll be paused, suspended, shut down, whatever, and copied over to our new data store. So we'll start seeing some activity over here. If we go to our graphs, we'll start seeing some stuff happening, probably around our network. So if we take a look at network traffic, this will start doing some stuff. We'll start seeing some activity. Let's just have a look over here, but it won't be until it starts actually moving stuff for us. Okay, so I just wanted to jump here dead quick so that you can see that we're kind of at this step here where we're copying the local VM disk to the shared storage. So if we go across to our FreeNAS box, we can see that we're getting a few gigabits a second here of data transfer. So we're getting about 4 gigabits a second here. I'm sure there's probably some tuning I can do to increase this speed. But actually that's not too bad considering that this is just running on a single spinny bit of Rust. That's quite nice read speed. So we're probably actually maxing out that physical single disk there. Excellent. Okay, so the hosted engine deployment is now complete. So if we drop out of this here, we'll exit the wizard because, hey, guess what? We've just set stuff up. I'll reload this window. And if we go back to the hosted engine tab, we can see already that, well, we've got a host configured with hosted engine. We can see the hosted engine is up. So we start to get some ability to control the maintenance for our cluster. And if we had Gluster for our storage, so say we had a bunch of disks in our compute nodes and we wanted to use those for storage for our VMs, we could use Gluster for that too. And it's possible here to configure that. I'm not using Gluster for this. We probably won't in this particular lab. I think it's just outside of the use case of what I want to target. So yeah, but no, overall, really straightforward, simple deployment. So what we're going to do now is if we go to oVirt.core.uk.eti.io, and we should be able to get into the managed engine. Here we go. So we've got a few different bits here. We've got the CA cert, which we're going to need to install if we want to get into any of the web consoles. But for now, we'll just drop into the admin portal. The user and password, here is admin and then whatever we set as part of the install process. And so we can see here what the installer started creating for us. So it's created a default data center We'll come and configure this shortly, but it's created this default data center, and the default data center has a storage domain, and this storage domain is where the hosted engine lives. So if we go and take a look at logical networks, we can see there's a management network being created. There's a default cluster. And if we take a look in the default cluster, we've got one host, which is the host that we've just done the installation to. We've got one virtual machine, which is the hosted engine, and you can see it. You can tell it's the active hosted engine because it's got the crown on it. So if you take a look at host and you want to know where your hosted engine's running, it'll have a little crown there. I'll show you what that looks like when we've got a few different hosts in the cluster, because you're going to want a couple of hosts anyway that are capable of running the hosted engine just for availability purposes. So if we take a look here, we've got a storage domain created in the default data center, and if we take a look here, if we wanted to, there's the little crown in our list of VMs, and if we wanted to create a new one, just hit new, and away we go. So I think we're in a good place now. We've got a basic oVirt cluster. So in our the next steps is to configure this to be something that we want to use, something that we can use, and something that uses our FreeNAS storage. So I'm going to take this opportunity to take a break to grab a cup of coffee, and then we'll be back to do the configuration. Okay, so that didn't go quite to plan, as you can tell. So I recorded the setup. Here's my excuses. So I recorded the setup of oVirt, and configured all the networking and all that good stuff, and my screen hadn't recorded properly. The video editing software or the recording software I use corrupted the first few frames of the video, and everything's gone to pot, so I need to go and re-record it. So this is probably going to be it from this video. I've just been through and started editing and stitching stuff together, and it's kind of getting long. We're about 40 minutes or something like that. So what I'm probably going to do now is split this into two parts, and the next video will cover kind of the configuration bits that I've done so far. That being said, thank you very much for watching. Hope it was useful. Hope it was informative. Please like, subscribe, do the YouTubey jazz. And if you didn't, please give me some feedback, leave a comment. Thanks very much. Have a good one. Bye-bye.